Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of Cabinet of Portsmouth City Council. Just in terms of housekeeping, there's no fire alarm expected, so if it goes off, it's real, and we should go over to Queen Victoria. And this meeting is being web streamed, so we'll go around in a second and introduce people. If members of the public are coming to do deputations, I think they just get your backs. They don't get you. They don't see your face. I'm Gerald Vernon Jackson. I'm leader of the City Council, and I chair this meeting.
Councillor Rob Wood, Cabinet Member for Children and Families.
Ben Dowling, Cabinet Member for Planning, Regeneration and Economic Development.
Susie Horton, Cabinet Member for Education.
Darren Sanders, Cabinet Member for Housing.
Lynn Stagg, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation.
Matthew Winson, Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care.
Kevin McKee, Parking Manager.
Wayne Layton, Finance Manager.
Moretti Hughes, Assistant Director for Buildings.
Steve Groves, Head of Building Maintenance.
James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhoods and Building Services.
Chris Ward, Director of Finance and IT.
Michael Lauder, Deputy Chief Executive.
Joanne Miles Smith, Democratic Services.
Councillor Steve Pitt, Deputy Leader of the Council, Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Sport.
Okay, in terms of apologies, I know we got apologies from Dave Ashmore that he'll be a few minutes late. As a single dad with 2 kids, he has to get to school. Actually, I think probably 9 o'clock is not a good idea, and 9:15 is better, so he's got time to get the kids to school before getting here. I don't know, I haven't heard from Jeanette, but we'll see how...
She's going to be a little late as well. She's got to take a car in for a service.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, colleagues, any declarations of interest that anybody needs or wishes to declare? Okay, minutes of previous meetings. Colleagues, are you happy with the minutes of the meeting of the 5th of February?
Leader, you had...
Yes. Declaration of...
sorry, beg your pardon.
I have a declaration of interest in that in the residence parking zone. I actually live in one of the zones that's proposed.
Okay, thank you.
So I will leave the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Lynn. Okay, colleagues, minutes of the meeting of the 5th of February. Colleagues, are you happy with those minutes? Yep, thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's go on through the agenda. Just to let people know, the item item 6, I'm suggesting that doesn't come forward, partly because the report was late, and partly because I think it probably needs to be some more work done on it. I don't like things arriving late because it doesn't allow a decent amount of public scrutiny of things. So we'll need to push that back to another meeting to make sure that we've got it right, and to make, in terms of having independent external directors on company boards of companies that the council owns. Okay, number 4 then, Leamington and Horatio House. We've got a written deputation from Maria Cole. David, do come and join us. And then do you want to introduce yourself and say who you are?
Dave Ashmore, Cabinet Member for Environment and Community Safety.
Any interest, David?
None at all.
Okay. Okay. So, colleagues, on page 21 of the papers, we've got this report, actually incredibly important report. James, do you want to introduce?
Yes, if I may, thank you.
But, colleagues, can you please take note of the deputation from Maria Cole? Thank you. James.
So thank you. I'll just say a few words to introduce the report, which is largely unchanged, but I can update you on the latest position with regard to the rehousing of the residents. So following the pre-cabinet briefing on the 12th of February, confidential briefings took place with a range of stakeholders prior to the publication of this report on the 18th of February. The report itself was published at lunchtime, there or thereabouts, on the 18th. And during the morning of the 18th of February, we were able to communicate what the report meant to those residents that remain in the 2 tower blocks, to the community around the two tower blocks and to those residents that have already moved from the tower blocks but have expressed an interest in returning. I start with that point because I wanted to put on record my gratitude to all of those that we briefed in confidence prior to the publication of the report, because it allowed us to apply a key principle that's underpinned all of our communications at the key milestones for the two towers. So at the point that we were talking to residents about ACM cladding, at the point we were talking to residents about needing to rehouse them, we held the principle that we as the landlord, PCC, has the opportunity first to talk directly to those most affected by the decisions before the inevitable rumours and speculations start to emerge by other means. So my thanks to all of those that were briefed and held the confidence. The communications on the 18th of February went very smoothly, and we didn't have any residents call us with any concerns or requests for support in light of the publication of the report. So the report itself, then, the purpose is stated very clearly that it's to bring to Cabinet the results of the feasibility work to look at strengthening the two tower blocks, and the report also contains the technical reports that we have from Wildcarter Clack and Mays Cost Consultancy Limited, and both of those reports, the technical reports, are central to the recommendations made. The recommendations on page 21 are clearly set out. The first recommendation is that Cabinet notes the feasibility work contained in the report in Appendix 1 and 2. In 2.12, we're asking Cabinet to agree that it's financially unviable to undertake the works to strengthen the two blocks. In the body of the report, you'll see that the estimate to do so is between 81 to 86 million pounds, which we're suggesting is financially unviable for the Council to undertake that level of work. 2.13, ask Cabinet to agree that on completion of the rehousing of the residents, the two blocks are removed from charge, decommissioned and secured, and that in 2.14 we continue with the current phase of work, which is to bring the blocks to that point in time. There is a key recommendation in 2.15, which is asking Cabinet to agree or note that there is an opportunity for the sites to be redeveloped to create affordable and social housing and regeneration in that area of the city, and suggests that Cabinet request the Regeneration Directorate working with the Housing Directorate to provide a report to Cabinet at a later point with a full options appraisal, which would include options to demolish the blocks and also then the options to develop the sites in consultation with the local and wider Somers Town community and stakeholders. In the body of the report, you'll see that whilst we're using the word demolition, we're mindful that that will invoke in some people's mind a sense that demolition may entail a use of explosion, that kind of thing, or explosives. The actual technical detail in the report suggests that the demolition method would be a deconstruction method because of the nature of the blocks and their proximity to the local community. So it would be deconstructed over time. And there is a strong emphasis here on a consultation leading the discussion on what might be replaced with the local community who are heavily invested in the two towers and what might come of it. The background section is there for background information, but it reminds us in part 3 on page 22 that in paragraph 3.4 that this project started in June 2017 as a project to remove the ACM cladding, whilst at that time reassuring our residents of their safety and putting in place additional measures whilst the cladding was removed. PCC at that time took decisive action to remove the cladding before there was any financial support available, and took the view that the safety of the residents was the overriding principle. And I would suggest that the management of that has been exemplary, and certainly the multi-agency working with a common purpose was absolutely essential in our ability to reassure residents whilst we remove the cladding. On pages 22 and 23, paragraphs 3.5 to 3.10, those sections focus on the feasibility work to replace the cladding. And in March 2018, we became aware that there was an issue with the concrete strength. And this is a defect which goes back to the construction of the two tower blocks way back in the late 50s and early 60s, whenever those panels were cast. The reports with all of the technical detail were available in the public domain and published on our website in July 2018. And I think it's at that point that the project changed from replacing the cladding to one where we were aware that the additional significant works would be required to the two tower blocks. Page 23 to 24, paragraphs 3.11 to 3.15 focus on the rehousing of the residents, and this is the point where I can update you on the very latest position. So in June 2018, the decision was taken to permanently rehouse all households from the two tower blocks, during which time we were able to put in place additional measures which enabled us to rehouse those residents over time, and that process is continuing. The report states the position in 3.14 as at the time the report was written at the 4th of February. So the very latest position is as at the 22nd of February, there are 39 households who continue to live in both blocks. Of those 39 households, 25 have accepted an offer. So in other words, they're in the process of moving. 5 have been offered an alternative property and are awaiting to view those properties, and 9 households are awaiting an offer. So we remain on track with the original intention, which is to have both of the blocks empty towards the back end of spring, early summer, but that sort of timescale. Whilst the rehousing was underway, the question remained, could we strengthen the blocks and deal with the underlying issues that were found going back to those defects in the concrete strength. And paragraphs 3.16 to 3.23, pages 24 and 25, go to that question, and the Wild Carter Clack report and the Mace Cost Consultancy Limited report help answer those questions, and our recommendations flow from the detail that they've provided, and all of that is in the body of the report for all to read. The report also contains input from the Regeneration Directorate and specifically the property and development teams. Whilst the recommendations suggest that you commission detailed options appraisals for the demolition and redevelopment of the sites, the report offers some indications arising from some preliminary work for the potential of the sites, and in Appendix 3 you have some indication of the potential, but it must be stressed that the detailed work is still required in consultation with the local community. If I may, I haven't publicly thanked a few teams, so I just wanted to take this opportunity, just for briefly, to publicly thank the housing teams, particularly the team based in the Somers Town Hub, corporate communications and building services, all of whom have played a key part in managing the issues arising from the two towers over that timescale. The input from a range of agencies, and specifically Hampshire Fire Rescue Service, has been incredible. They've supported us every step. And more importantly from me, just to publicly thank the residents living in the two tower blocks, some of whom have been living in those blocks for many years, and that local community who have shown incredible understanding and cooperation with us as the issues have emerged and they've been placed in the public domain. Without their support, it would have been an incredibly difficult project to manage, so my thanks to all of those. I don't propose to say anything else, but we're very happy to take questions.
Thank you, James. Jeanette, good morning. Any interests you have to declare?
Apologies for absence, but no declaration of interest.
Thank you very much indeed. James, I've got a few questions, if that's all right. But Donna and Luke, I think you're both indicating. Do you want to come and have a? Okay, sorry. It's not on my list, but you're more than welcome. No, I'm sure it's fine. It's okay. I was about to ask you anyway because I know you both have an interest in this. So it's good to see you both. So who would like to go first?
Well, firstly, I wasn't on your list, so thank you very much
That's
for permitting me to speak in your courtesy, and that is appreciated. I really just wanted to make a point about one of the recommendations that you've got, which relates to the replacement of the site, because I think we need to be perhaps a little more sort of honest in some of the discussions on this, because the reality of it is that you cannot build sub-market housing without a subsidy. It can't be done. I mean, housing associations typically for affordable rent are looking for £60,000 per unit. That is the norm. You have properties which obviously have 106 led development, but that is subsidised by the rest of the schemes being built at the time, and of course we've had some council house building, but that has been, the subsidy has effectively been the right to buy receipts, so you've had a subsidy in from that. But without a subsidy available, this is the sort of thing that just doesn't stack up, and high-rise construction is more expensive per square metre to build than low-rise, albeit the land values then are taken into account, but the actual construction cost is higher. So, when you are referring to an aspiration to develop the site for affordable housing, I completely concur with the aspiration. I do have some scepticism about how deliverable it is. I mean, there may be government grants you can bid for, and that, if you can get a government grant, obviously you should do so, and that will change the viability of the whole thing. But without any subsidy being available, this is going to be very difficult to achieve. And I would suggest, as a personal comment, and I haven't said this to Donna, so
you might be in trouble.
I might be. As a personal comment and relating to one of the items later in the agenda, that one option for doing this could be, in effect, for the Northern Quarter site, as was, to seek off-site contributions from there and use that as a means of redeveloping these sites.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Donna, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by saying thank you to the officers for giving us the advance briefing of the report being published. That was helpful, and obviously we took the confidence that they'd given us, but it is very useful to have that indeed. Yesterday, in preparation for today, I met with colleagues at the LGA down here in Portsmouth to talk to them about the sort of what other councils are doing across the country where they have had blocks like this, where obviously it's been retrospectively, we have found out once taking cladding off that obviously the buildings are not structurally as strong as we would like them to be, and in particular our case obviously being the strength, the concrete tension of those floors. I've also done some, and sometimes a section of information can be quite dangerous if you don't have the whole picture, so I appreciate being in opposition we don't have the whole picture that maybe you guys have, but we are still here as public representatives to make our points based on the information that we do have. And I have spoken to contractors and people who have been approached to quote for the remediation works if we were to undertake them on these blocks. And actually, the figures that have been coming back to me, some of them are 30 to 40% less than the figure you have in front of you today for remediation. Figures sort of nearer late 50s, early 60 millions. Still a huge amount of money, I grant you. But I do think that when you are taking this into consideration today, there are ways that work could be done for less money, and maybe, one of the other items we've got on the agenda today is Ravelin, and how you look at working cross-party and potentially working with the private sector to develop sites around the city. Could this be a way of refurbishing these buildings rather than knocking them down? I also would urge the Cabinet to, if you've moved the people out, I made it clear before that my assessment of the risk, whilst I absolutely acknowledge from the Carter-Clack report that there is absolute, the concrete tension isn't where it needs to be, I have to say that, this is about a substantial gas explosion in that building which could lead to a partial collapse. But the piped gas was removed in 1991 and tenants are prohibited from having colour gas bottles or any kind of gas canisters in their flats. So I think this council has been very responsible in mitigating risk. Having said that, of course, the safety of our residents has to be the number one priority, and I appreciate that. I think, you know, the Cabinet have made it very clear that that is their number one priority, and I fully respect your position on that. But I do think that, you know, I would like to see more information around, which I know has been done, I just haven't, I'm not privy to it, around some of the other feasibility works, and potentially selling the blocks as well. I know that there's been an assessment in the report to say that the blocks would probably bring low value. Well, actually, when we did inform our insurance company last year in March about this risk, when we had the second opinion in from a second surveyor, actually the insurance premium didn't really move at all on this. So I think that the private sector may have a different view to us, but certainly looking at other councils across the country who are repairing buildings when they have this issue, albeit those buildings may be considerably younger, but I still think that we need to give serious consideration, because the point that Councillor Stubbs has made is absolutely imperative, that without a huge amount of right to buy receipts going in there or other kind of public subsidy from prudential borrowing alone, we will never be able to redevelop these sites. We're going to have to get a subsidy from somewhere, because borrowing alone to build those council properties simply does not meet prudential borrowing requirements in the UK.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful. So I think that I've got a few questions, James, if that's okay. The first is the ACM cladding that was removed. Am I right that that's similar to the cladding at Grenfell Tower, where there was the huge problem, the huge loss of life?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so I'm very pleased that that was removed. I think, particularly following from Donna's deputation, would you like to say a little bit more about the level of risk involved in terms of where we currently are with those tower blocks, and what your recommendation to us in terms of risk would be, or risk to tenants?
Okay. The detail that we've relied on is in the reports that are on the website. They were on the website, have been on the website since July 2018. There's no other material as such. Those reports talk about the risk of what's called an unpiped gas explosion in the property. So in essence, it's an explosion that's caused by overpressure within a property, which could be from a colour gas type cylinder or that type. We can mitigate that risk. So as correctly been stated, there is no gas in the blocks. There are features in the blocks which have enabled us to be assured that the residents can remain in there whilst we remove the cladding and deal with those other issues. However, what the reports clearly show you is that whilst you can mitigate the risk, we cannot fully treat it. So in the event of one of those incidents occurring, as low as that may be, the building will simply not respond in the way it should. So there is a structural defect in the building. When these buildings were designed, they should have been built with a different concrete strength. So buildings will, occasionally have extreme fires, that will have explosions. We've seen that in Portsmouth. They will cause damage. But what you shouldn't see is a building collapsing, a partial collapse or a catastrophic structural failure, which is what could happen with those two tower blocks. Now, those assessments are part of the reports. Of course, there'll be different opinion to that, but as an officer, all I can say to you is, yes, we can mitigate the risk, which is what we've done. However, there was a point in time where you fully appreciated that we couldn't fully treat the risk and that we should rehouse the residents whilst we considered what to do next. The point of today's report really is about strengthening the properties, and it says that it does provide you with the options. You can strengthen those properties and deal with that underlying defect, but at enormous cost. That's all I can really say to that point.
Okay. All right. Rob,
I'll ask a question on that.
Yeah, do.
Okay.
As it's your ward particularly.
I I've not had any resident come to me and say they want to stay in there. In fact, most of them don't want to stay in there because what you know is what you know straight away. But if we were to take the line to knowing that you could take mitigating circumstances, maybe this is for the city solicitor, if we knowingly did something there and then something happened in the future, would the council have a liability because they knew in advance that there was a risk, and if something happened like somebody did take in a Calagas against the rules and blew it up and that affected other, would we have a liability knowing that?
Well, that's a pretty wide-ranging question. At the moment, that's not where we are. Where we are at the moment is we've decanted the people from the blocks. That's the safest thing to do. That was the position which we took with our insurers. We have never got as far with our insurers as having the discussion with them on the suggestion, the basis that we would allow people to remain within the buildings. So I wouldn't like to speculate on what could happen. The truth is, people are out of the building. That was the safest thing to do, and we now need to move forward from there.
Okay. All right. Now, personally, I think it's a good report, and I think there are several key things. I think, inevitably, one has to analyse risk all the time in things, but it seemed to me it was the right thing to do to move residents out. I understand, and it may not be true, but I'd be interested to hear that I think there have been some gas canisters found in the block over time, which seemed to me to say that there was a risk. And it seems to me, instead of repairing a tower block that is 50 years old, actually building something new and better is probably the right way to go. I think it's absolutely crucial that in any redevelopment that there is an absolute guarantee that we replace at least the number of social housing units that are there as an absolute minimum, and I hope that we will be able to increase the amount of social housing units. Inevitably, you've got to do some calculations about the money and try to make sure that it works in an economic way. But let's see if we can move above the 272 social housing units. Finally, from my point of view, I think it's really important that we work with people in the local community. There's the Summertown Master Plan that local residents spent many years working on, and that would be a very helpful initial tool of how people might wish to see the area change. And I think it's really important that we use that. But that's my view to begin with. Darren.
Thank you, Gerald. I just want to ask some questions following on from various things which have been said, not just in Donna's deputation and what Gerald has said, but at the cross-party briefings as well. And I want to start with the point Gerald raised, Steve, which emerged in the cross-party briefing we had. And that is that there aren't supposed to be any gas canisters in the building. There's the prohibited sign on the ground floor. I know we agreed that there will be any amnesty if we ever found any as part of the rehousing work. Did we ever find any? Meredith.
Thank you, Darren. Yes. During the face-to-face meetings that we had with residents after the announcement last June, we found 5 canisters were offered up by residents when we visited their homes and their stores. 3 small camping cylinders, 200 grams, and 2 larger patio gas canisters, which are 2.5 kilogram sizes.
Okay. Thank you for that, Meredith. The second one, and this may be a bit more vague, a partial collapse has been mentioned, and I know that was mentioned in the various public reports. What does that mean?
Okay, if I can answer that. Every building that's designed and constructed should be constructed in such a way that if there was an event in a part of the structure, the extent of the resulting collapse shouldn't be disproportionate to the original cause. So if there's a disproportionate collapse, essentially that is where a small area damage has occurred in the structure, and that will lead to the collapse of a major part of the structure that is disproportionate to the original cause. And so that would mean, in essence, that you may have a small explosion in one room, but that may have an impact progressively on the rest of the structure, and an elevation or a number of floors may collapse as a result of that explosion.
Okay, so basically we're talking about floors collapsing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. In the documentation I've seen around this report, particularly around the refurbishment, this is a study called MACE, and also from Wildcarder Clack as well. My reading of it was that even if we did the refurbishing work, although it would comply with building regulations in 2012, it would not comply with current building regulations. Have I read that right?
Yes, you've read right. The assessment criteria is a structural assessment of, it's based on a handbook produced by the BRE, which is the accepted guidance that for large panel system buildings, of which these two blocks are, but it is accepted that they will not meet the current building regulations, even if they met that criteria.
So even if we, I'd be grateful to hear some details of names of contractors we get less money for, who do for less money. Even so, the argument is that they would not comply with current building regulations if we refurbish the block.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you for that. I now want to move from the risk to the cash, and I want to, Christopher, if I may, have a discussion with Wayne just for a little while.
It needs to be a little while.
It will be little. So one of the issues is around the money and how the money is going to be spent. Some people have said that the council has a plan to refurbish. I think that's been pretty clear from everybody this morning. We don't have a plan to refurbish, and we don't want to do that. But would council tax be used for refurbishing or demolishing these buildings, Wayne? Could it be?
The asset at the moment sits within the housing revenue account, so the costs will be met from the HRA.
So Wayne, I think we were looking for either a yes or a no.
No.
Thank you.
And finally, I want to back up Luke's point, because Luke was very, as usual, is entirely consistent, and mentioned this in the briefing that we had with him. He says that basically no sub-market housing can be built on the site without a subsidy. However, he includes right to buy receipts as a subsidy. And if we borrow something, we get our money back. I'm not sure I would count that as a subsidy. But could any sub-market housing be built on the site without subsidy? Any?
It's quite difficult to answer, depending on the size of the development that you actually want to put on there. But it really comes down to, the amount of infrastructure. The fact that you've got to spend 5 to 6 million to actually be able to make the site, to demolish the site, it would be incredibly challenging to just build social housing on that site. And we would have to look for some form of subsidy from somewhere.
Or to build some private.
Which could be building private.
It could be through government grant, private investment, and doing it for our own company.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to make a few comments, if I may.
Okay.
Which is to echo what James has said. This has been incredibly challenging for everybody concerned. The people living there, their families. I know how hard that's been. But the truth is really, really simple. We have to put resident safety before money. And some of the stuff I've heard today about what a partial collapse would mean around the fact that gas canisters were found in there really does concern me. And the fact that if we refurbish the blocks, they wouldn't meet current building regulations. All those things indicate that the plan that we've had before, which is, as James has said, the logical consequence of what Donna and Luke and our Conservative colleagues did when they actually rightly declared the building without knowing whether they'd ever get the money back. That was the right thing to do, and that is the approach that we've continued to take. But we've got to look to the future, and I think this, in a weird way, is a chance. This is the second time these blocks have had people move out in 20 years. And I think the people of Somerstown deserve a longer-term solution, not a sticking plaster. And I think if we'd refurbished the blocks, we would just have had a sticking plaster, even if we'd done it for considerably less, as Donna has outlined. So we have to take this opportunity, not just to provide at least 272 units of social housing on the site, preferably more, but also to give a chance to actually try and make the area better. Somerstown has very often got a bad reputation in this city. And I think this is a chance to actually help make the place better, help provide better quality design, help provide better homes. And that's why, and I think our approach, as Rob has indicated, has broad support across the whole of the city. And I think we're all grateful for that support. and I want to try and make sure that we carry on the principles that our Conservative colleagues established when they were in power, which is to put people's safety first and not worry about the money. And I hope we can make the scheme work better. I think we've heard everything about the need to make sure we have long-term solutions, and I endorse this report.
Thank you. I have Steve and Matt.
Yes, just to drill down a little bit on the financial situation, you quoted 81 to 86 million as the likely refurbishment costs if we were to go down that route. Is there any way that if we went down that route and did refurbishment that we would be able to repay that amount of money within 25 to 30 years from the income from the blocks?
Not as social or affordable rented. No.
If we were to look at Councillor Jones's model, which is maybe 50 to 60 million, is that also unaffordable on the rents from those blocks?
Not without subsidy.
Okay, so, and we know from the report that the extended life that we will get from refurbishing the blocks is somewhere between 20 and 30 years. Is that also correct?
Well, I think it says 30 years in the report, but
I can confirm that it was 30 years is what we were.
It's moved around a bit. It's settled on 30, I think. Okay, so we're in a position where if we went down the refurbishment route and we rehomed 272 families into those blocks, we would have to finance them and end up with the debt at the end of it and still have to demolish the blocks. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Matt?
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of comments. I think I endorse what has been said already about the fact that I think we have to put the needs of people first before any other consideration. I thought it was very interesting from Meredith about the canisters that were in the blocks, and I think unless you're going to have some kind of Big Brother style authoritarian state in the city, if people will always take things into their homes and their blocks that maybe they're not supposed to. The fact that happened already is something that is just shows that anyway, and I think we should always be looking at what the worst case scenario is, because these are people. You can't put any value on their lives. If there's any risk at all, you can't spend enough money. So in fact it's priceless rather than worthless, what we're doing there. So I think it's absolutely the right thing to do, to look forward in that way. I also think that it's really important as well to have at least 272 social units, but also, as Councillor Rudy mentioned in the paper this week, it's also important to have mixed communities, and that's where the opportunity really comes about. Rather than making this an area that only people who are in social housing want to live, make it into a community where everyone wants to go, where it is a real mixed community, where there's people living cheap by jail as they do right across this city. Even just down the road, I remember I used to walk in from when I lived in Elm Grove, walking through Somerstown, and you've got King Street on one side and a council block on the other. And that is a way that we have mixed communities, where people are living cheap by jail and they're living together. That creates communities, and I think that's a real opportunity we've got here to make this a better community, to bring people together and to work with the local community, because the local community, as we've seen from the written deputation from Maria Cole from Patch, that's a really positive point of view, and to have that there from local people. But for me, that's the most important thing in this meeting. That's the most important document, is that coming from local people saying that we think this is the right thing to do, we want to be involved in remodelling this community, and it was the right thing to take people out and redevelop the site. So I completely endorse the report.
Okay, colleagues, and we've got a series of recommendations. Colleagues, you happy with the recommendations in front of us? Yes. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Moving on to residents' car parking consultation update, which starts on page 57. and I think we need to note that Lynn is leaving the room. Because I don't have any deputation requests on this one either. I think this is just a quick update to tell people where we are.
Sorry,
Sorry?
Councillor Jones said that she may speak on
sorry.
any of the items.
Donna?
Actually, I said I would like to be put down to speak on everything.
Okay, so would you like to...
Passing up on this one.
Okay. It feels slightly like the okey dokey. So, colleagues, this is just an update of where we are in terms of the consultation and the rolling programme of consultations with local residents that we have going on. It appears that when residents are asked what they would like at the moment, they're saying they would like residents' car parking zones, and therefore it's sensible to have a rolling programme of asking the next door area what they then think. So that it's done in a systematic and a planned way. Colleagues, anybody else? No? Is everybody happy with this? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, colleagues. So my view is that we should defer item 6. Jerry, you wanted to come and speak on it. Do you want to come and speak about whether you want it not to be deferred? No. Okay. Okay. Donna, do you want to speak on why it shouldn't be deferred?
No, but only say thank you for sharing the information with me yesterday. I fully support your decision and reasons.
And actually, I think it would be a sensible thing to do for us to sit down as group leaders and go through this before, so that we can come up with something that we all think is sensible and that's going to stand the test of time, because inevitably there will be changes of administration over time. But yeah, well, we have a hope for the next few decades. But after that, maybe. Moving on, we've now got. We're now asked to go to do an exclusion of the press and public, Michael. Can you, before Jerry comes and talks, and I'm very happy, could you explain to me why? Because I am deeply unconvinced about why we should.
I think there's a possibility that some of the exempt appendices you may wish to refer to, it may well be very possible, as you've done successfully in the past, to actually deal with the report which is in front of you without having to deal with anything which is exempt. And if that's the case, then I'm sure you can proceed. But I suggest you pass the resolution, just in case somewhere along the line you want to move into an exempt session. But I'm sure members will wish, as much as possible, to deal with everything in open.
Okay. My worry, Michael, is that these are companies that are owned by a public body, and if there's advice about how they should be run, shouldn't the people of the city see that advice, because they are the ultimate owners of it?
It may be that members perhaps don't wish to accept all of that advice or wish to challenge the advice, in which case I may wish to give you advice upon the advice which you've received. And I would prefer that that was not done in an open session. Let's see how we go, may I suggest, Leader, and see whether or not you need to actually refer to any of the matters which would be exempt.
Okay, well, Jerry, do come and talk.
That was the best guest minister thing I've heard in
Been working on that for ages, haven't you, Michael?
This will be very brief. So my deputation on the exclusion of the press and public. So once again, we have a sledgehammer to crack a nut being employed by PCC, in my view. I'm hoping that members have been fully consulted about the information proposed to be exempt and have had the opportunity to assess for themselves whether or not such a suggestion of exemption should be implemented, rather than just being presented with it at the meeting and having the discussion at that point. So, have members been consulted on the matter in advance? Is it to be debated here and the people thrown out while the exemption is discussed? That should be something that happens before the meeting occurs. However, we have, this is only an example, we have a pervasive culture of secrecy in PCC, and it permeates everywhere. Secrecy should be the last resort, not the first. It shouldn't be a catch-all just in case something might be confidential. It should be the last resort. This is public things that we're talking about, and taxpayers' money that is being spoken about spent. Sometimes the shadow of Sir Humphrey stretches a long way from Westminster. I'd really like to see a change in the rules regarding deputations, because at the moment, if you want to make a deputation about something, you have to put in the request by midday, the day before, the working day before the meeting. But the report wasn't published by then. There was nothing in the agenda to say why it was going to be late. There was nothing in the agenda to say when it would be delivered. There was nothing, and we got past the cut-off time. So I put in a request to talk about item 6 before the thing was published, because otherwise I would have no chance. So I'd like to see a change in the rules about deputations, so that a deputation can be made without notice on items that haven't been published in the normal timescales, and the items that are not published by midday, the day before the actual meeting, must be deferred, because there is no opportunity for the public to read and comment on such a thing. That's it, thank you.
Thanks, Jerry, and I think you make good points about how things should operate, which we'll go away and think about. I wonder if we might do these one at a time, and in terms of the Ravlin group of companies, in terms of the appendix, Tom, or what is the reason for us for that not to be public?
Thank you, Leader. You have two appendices that are exempt, both of which contain legal privileged information that I do not believe would be in the Council's best interest at this time to make public. I do believe, however, it is possible to have a discussion about the paper without going into exempt session.
Okay, so let's do these one at a time. So, colleagues, the advice from Tom is that we can have the discussion in public, but just try to keep the appendix. Try not to refer to the appendix. So I just need to get to the right page. Colleagues, are you happy with that suggestion from Tom? Yes. Okay. Fine. But let's keep the discussion going in public session. Okay. So, who wants to introduce Tom?
Thank you very much, Leader. And good morning, members.
Oh, sorry, Jerry. I thought that's the one you did. No. Oh. Fine. Okay. In which case, sorry. Beg your pardon. Do.
Tom not want to present this.
So let's do Tom first, and then can we do Jerry second? Is that all right? Lovely. And Donna and Judith, do you want to speak on Ravlin?
Not on Ravlin.
Okay, but great, and that's fine, no problem. But Donna would like to. Okay, so we go Tom, Jerry, Donna. Far away.
Thank you, Leader. If I may, the presentation will be myself and Wayne, if that's all right.
Okay.
Okay. So, firstly, I'd just like to say that obviously I'm here this morning deputising for Tristan Samuels, Director of Regeneration. Secondly, I'd like to point out that I am named in the report as a director of one of the companies this paper discusses, but I don't believe that gives any prejudicial reason why I can't present that this morning. Okay, so the report before you builds on the decision that was taken by this group in June 16 to set up the Ravlin group of companies. The report clearly sets out the purpose and key objectives of the group, along with the mechanisms of control and the benefits the Council and ultimately the residents will see through its use. To point out a couple of the key areas of this report, I would draw your attentions to section 4, which is succinctly is the purpose, sections 6.2 onwards, which talks about the shareholder control, i.e. the control the Council has over the mechanisms here, and sections 8.5, which are some of the benefits of developing through the Council. The other important document for discussion is Appendix A, which is the business case, and I'm going to pass over to Wayne to give a quick summary of that.
I'm just going to give an overview of the key points within Appendix A. So the council's relationship with Ravelin, there are two main relationships. One is as the shareholder and the other one is as lender. So as a shareholder, the company will create dividends that can be remitted back to the council, and the council receives 100% of those as the only shareholder of the company. And those dividends can be used to support services and contribute towards future capital schemes. The model proposed sees that Ravelin developing sites potentially in partnership under some sort of agreement with the Housing Revenue Account, where the HRA would be able to deliver sub-market rent products, and the private homes will be constructed and sold through Ravelin. This means that the council effectively retains the profits that would ordinarily have been earned by private developers. This could help the council develop sites that are financially unviable as sub-market rented developments, with profits from the private sales helping to contribute towards the cost of infrastructure and also the affordable housing within those developments. The other relationship is that through lending. So there will be a facility agreement between the council and Ravelin, and the facility agreement effectively is the conditions for which we will actually loan money to the company. And this will state that the council can only release funds once a robust financial case has been put together that sets out what the likely return will be for the council and what it will get on its development. And this should help limit the financial risk to the council on a project-by-project basis. The council will act as lender to Ravelin on a commercial loan basis, and this will provide an income to the councils that will be able to charge Ravelin a market rate for lending, and potentially it would either use its own cash resources or it could borrow from PWLB, but either way it will be cheaper for us to borrow than it will be the income that we get in, so we make a profit from that. The other offshoot for that is it also enables us to reduce our corporation tax liability, or Ravelin's corporation tax liability, through additional costs. The operating costs of the company will be limited by the amount of development that it's actually going to carry out. So the staffing for the company will be essentially provided by council officers in form of the strategic projects team, legal, finance and procurement, and that will be done under an SLA type agreement. So there'll be no, and Ravelin will also won't have its own accommodation, so it means there's no large overhead on the company. Ravelin will, however, need to, and this is what the paper says, need to employ non-executive directors to sit on its board, specifically who have experience in commercial house building, and there will be an ongoing cost to that. We haven't looked at the recruitment for that, and that's something which we will look at in the future. So the business case, as it's written within Appendix A, has focused on the 5 sites that we brought to Cabinet back in October 2018, which was Arundel Street, Southsea Community Centre, Hambrick, Doyle Avenue and Museum Road. And each of those sites are owned by Portsmouth. Some of them are in the lands owned in the HRA, some of them are in the General Fund. And that report said that from those sites we would be able to deliver 223 homes, and the report also said that around about 35% of those homes would be affordable. And the reason that's key is that obviously this was the original proposal, and all of the numbers that I'm going to give out now are based on that basis. So table 1 in the report shows that the construction cost for the private element, including land, would be in the region of about 24 million, and sales of 32.6, resulting in a development profit of about 4.8 million, based on that mix of sites and the difference between affordable and private rented. And for the purpose of this financial appraisal, it's also assumed that Ravelin will pay the red book valuation, i.e. the market value for that land, so it won't be getting it cheap. So additionally, and rather crudely, we've said that we reckon the operating costs will be around about £500,000 per year. That's got to be caveated because obviously it's linked to the amount of actual activity that the company delivers. So if it's not trading at all, then obviously that operating cost is significantly less. And then once you take into account corporation tax, it looks like, based on those assumptions, that Ravelin could make around about a 5% return, or £1.7 million. Table 2 of the report looks at what a forecast profit and loss would look like over the 5 years, and is based on, and again is based on those assumptions. And cumulatively, over the 5 years, the company could make as much as £3.5 million, with losses made in the first 3 years. However, it should be noted those losses made in that early period are as a result of cash flow. So those losses are made up primarily of construction costs of development. So if the company were to wind up, then there would be legal agreements in place where we could recover the money from the value of the land and the works carried out to date. And then finally, I just wanted to say, based on those assumptions as well, the income from the lending, which I talked about earlier on, based on this form of development, would mean that it could generate potentially around about £1.3 million to the council in lending.
Thank you.
That's it.
Okay, thank you much indeed. Jerry.
My deputation is not going to add any value to this, so I'm not going to do it.
Oh, I can't believe that's true, but we have to take your word for it. Donna.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think I'm really pleased with the reports here. To start with, I think it's very useful. Obviously, we took decisions on behalf of the City Council back in 2016 around Ravelin, but I think this just really helps to cement that again. One of the big issues that we came across previously when we were considering this item and how to maximise income for the council, how to utilise our assets as best as we possibly could to get the most from them, and then appreciating that's not always best done within the council's rigid structure, was the conundrum of transferring very valuable assets into a company that then becomes tax liable. And I'm really grateful that Wayne just covered that off, actually, because what we did is, and for those of you that haven't seen it, it would be worth asking Chris and Wayne for a copy of it, is we then commissioned Deloitte to do a very specific piece of work for us at the end of 16, beginning of 17, to look at the tax situation and how, and it does say in the report actually in 3.2 about the fact that the Ravelin Holding Company and Ravelin Limited was created as a delivery vehicle for Dunsbury, but then actually putting a £50+ million asset into a company that then becomes subject to corporation tax. And actually, when the model was first brought forward to us by colleagues actually in housing, not in property, they hadn't given consideration to the tax situation, which frightened the life out of me. So that's why we then got the Deloitte's report done. And I think it's very useful, and the use of the shareholders' dividends, I think, is absolutely the right way to go. And whilst we don't want to be doing anything illegally in terms of tax avoidance, we obviously want to have tax mitigation, which everyone wants to do, apart from the Chancellor probably. But, you know, so from my perspective, I think putting council assets into a vehicle which enables us to do clever things with it is definitely the right way to go. 4.2.1 of the report talks about this being, you know, makes reference to the reason this was started as being part of an income generation scheme. And whilst the report talks in 5.2 about refurbishing, it talks about new social housing and affordable housing development through the company, I think it is also important that the company focuses on refurbishment of existing buildings. It doesn't necessarily have to be knocked down and rebuilds. I think the LLP model, I won't go any further than that because it's referred to in the exempt appendix, but the LLP model for me is something that I would definitely be looking at if it were me, but obviously that's entirely up to you. And actually Wayne made reference to that partnership between the housing revenue account and Ravelin and how this could work, and that was the kind of point I was referring to when I was talking about Horatio and Leamington earlier, which is quite an important one. We know that the private sector can deliver properties, new build, one bed flats, 2- and 3-bed houses far cheaper than we can, so let's utilise some of their experience, bring our own costs down, and even though we're then having to share the profits, actually it's better for everybody if we can bring our costs down and mitigate our risk as a council as well. In terms of item 6, I know it was pulled, but when we were looking at this previously, when I then took on the role of Pred as well as leader, Councillor Stubbs then became a director of Ravelin Holding Company, which I believe he still is. I checked with Michael yesterday, and I thought we'd appointed David Tompkins to Ravelin Limited, but apparently not. But, you know, I would really welcome the conversation with you, Gerald, about that at some point in the future. But basically, I support this, and I think it's really great. And apologies, I've got to go.
Do you want to quickly do your one about the next, about city centre?
30 seconds on each, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem at all.
MMD, yes, support what's been put, obviously director of the company, so with my director of the company hat on as opposed to councillor, you know, you either wind the company up and lease the land out to someone else, or you have to invest in it. We are really getting there. The last 2 years we've made significant progress in MMD, and I say go for it on that one. In terms of city centre regeneration, I made my points yesterday when we met with Delancey, which was very useful. Thank you very much for that. And like I said yesterday, I had a great explanation afterwards from Tristan and from Mark Enderby from Delancey about the strategy of how to make sure we are getting the best out of that land going forward, because of course for those that weren't there, my concern was that we were only looking at parcels 1 and 2 of land out of 4, 5 and 6, and I would like them to be working with us on everything. I think we'll get there with that, so I'm happy that the officers have got that in hand.
Great.
Thank you.
And as always, good to see you. No, I mean it. But thank you. That's helpful. In which case, should we just keep on going just with Ravelin for the minute? Oh, Judith, do you want to do your microphone? Otherwise, your words were not held for posterity.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say with Ravelin that setting up these kind of companies is something that a lot of authorities are doing at the moment. And I think it is something that's necessary in order to release land and to do mixed housing developments. I hope that, and I'm sure that all of you would agree, that we should always look to maximise the amount of affordable housing on these sites. And I can see that this allows for that. And I'm not wanting to propose any amendments in wording at this stage, but I think if that is always the test, then I'm very happy with what we're doing here. I know it's been set in train for some time, but it is something that is being done by Labour councils across the country, and it's something that is very much to do with being able to support bringing forward good developments and bringing some money back into the council. And I'm pleased to say that this absolutely conforms with your investment strategy that you passed at the end of the beginning of the year, your income generation strategy, which will be in Portsmouth and bring money back into the city. So I just wanted to say that
okay, thanks. So
you should approve this.
That's very helpful, Judith. And actually, I think you make a good point, because I think we are very clear that, and this administration, that we are very keen on doing the maximum amount of affordable social housing and affordable housing. That isn't true for all, and we've heard a little bit before at the beginning of this meeting that for some of our colleagues that isn't their priority. And maybe we have to think, I don't want to change it now, but it might be something we want to change for the future, is just to make sure that there is an explicit thing within Ravelin about delivering the maximum amount of social and affordable housing, so it's written into its terms of reference. But I don't want to do that on the hoof. Let's have a think. But that's a good point, because I think we do need to try to make sure that we protect the people of the city from some of the things that were said earlier in this meeting.
I mean, not all sites are suitable for social housing, and also we do need to be making money to invest in other much-needed public services. So I think it's always a compromise, but we must always subject things to the affordable housing test before going ahead.
Okay, I've got Darren and Rob.
Thanks, Joe. I have one question and a few comments. Wayne, how does this interact with the lifting of the borrowing cap on councils building things? How do you envisage this going forward, so the two working together?
Well, any borrowing we take under the HRA has still got to conform to the Prudential Code. It just means that with the borrowing cap being lifted, we can be more ambitious in what we do. So when we were talking about the project earlier on, Horatio and Leamington, the size of that project, under the previous borrowing rules, we would not have been able to do anything, used unsupported borrowing without making a further application towards it. So it just helps us be more ambitious.
Yeah.
And a few comments, if I may.
Of course.
I first talked about this idea with housing officers when I was last in this post around 2013, so this is quite old in terms of what was going on, and I'm delighted our Conservative successors honoured it. I think it's an essential tool in our armour. We've got a range of things to do in order to make sure we can sort the housing crisis in this city, and anything that can assist that is useful, and that's why this is very, very good. I would agree with what Gerald said. I think if we're going to we can't just take forward an affordable housing product, because for many people that's just not affordable in this city, and we have to make sure that we can provide homes people can afford, because if we carry on with the affordable housing and purely affordable housing, then that is going to be out of the reach of many people. I know that's not what this council wants to do, it's not what this administration wants to do, but I support what Gerald was saying about going forwards, making sure we can mix up social and affordable housing. The only issue I would say going forwards is around the governance. And you've outlined some good long-term ways going forwards, but we do have some short-term issues which are outlined in the white papers of the report. I agree entirely with the Bevan Britton advice with regards to directorships and stuff like that, which we can't talk about, but I agree with it entirely. I think it's very sensible for everything that we have done, but I do think there's an issue that may have to be resolved through the group leaders in terms of actually trying to see who goes on this board quite quickly, because if people are coming off quite quickly, we might need to put people on quite quickly so we can make progress. Gerald. But I support the report.
Thank you. Rob?
Yes, it's a great report, having had experience of startups being on a main board, etc. on that. Just a few pointers. One is you require quite a lot of support from other organisations. I hope in your plans down the line that you look to subsume that support within your own organisation if it's a successful organisation. By that I mean legal and other sort of areas, because initially it's good, but later on it becomes compromised. It's not very specific to the company that you're doing, so it's quite important that you do something as far as that's concerned. Great about the taxation. I was really worried about the taxation. You've got it now. You've got your eye on it. And I would cover that point that Darren said that I'm not allowed to mention about the directors, the makeup of the directors, etc. Really important to have good directors, irrelevant of housing knowledge. Okay, thanks.
Okay, for the record, I completely disagree with the Bevan Britton advice, and as a director over the years of many local authority companies where I've been a director, I think their advice is completely incorrect, but I think probably follows their political view. But such is life, and we all cope with lawyers, or try to at least. So we will come back to that, and we'll see where we get to it and how much weight we give to something of no use. Okay, so colleagues, there is a recommendations in front of us for the Ravelin Group. Can I see those in favour of the recommendations in the paper and those against? Thank you very much indeed. Can we go on to the city centre regeneration? Tom, Natasha, why should this joint venture agreement not be in the public domain? It's a contract between the council and somebody else.
The ones that are confidential are legal advice, and they are the specifics behind the heads of terms, both of which contain commercially sensitive information. I'm really sorry, I'm basically shouting.
That's right.
Yeah, that's probably more intelligent. Yeah, so they both contain confidential information around the legal standing and the commerciality of the agreement.
So, but Michael, in this one, I can't, and Tom, I can't see anything in that is in any way commercially sensitive. All it says is it's 50-50, which is what we've said in public.
So that is a set of heads of terms that will lead to the long drafting of the agreements.
Yeah.
Those are done in confidence between the two parties at this time. We haven't expressly asked Delancey for the right to share that information, but there are things within it that we ourselves consider to be confidential on that commercial point.
Okay, I think we probably have to listen to that, but I think if we're coming back with anything like this again, I can't understand why, and maybe we haven't asked Delancey if they would be happy for it to be published, and they're not here, unfortunately. It is deeply inoffensive as a document, and it therefore bemuses me why it is not in the public domain. So Tom, if you're coming back to this in future, can you presume that everything will be in public? Unless there's an extremely good reason why it shouldn't, and I haven't heard one today, except that they're not here and we shouldn't do it to them without asking, because that would not start the relationship off in the right foot after 16 years of working with them.
I think you've made your position clear. We'll do our best to achieve that.
Okay, all right. But on the basis of the advice, colleagues, with regret, I'm going to move that we do keep the heads of terms confidential at the appendix, at least for the minute. Are you happy with that, colleagues? Okay. Natasha, then. Bring us out of the world of secrecy into the areas of light.
Sure. I'm going to be quite brief on this for a couple of reasons, voice being one of them. The report's coming back, is being resubmitted, following the Cabinet meeting on the 5th of February, so I really wanted to draw your attention to the changes that we've made following the feedback last time. So within point 3.6, we have added the point about striving to exceed the planning requirement, the minimum of planning requirements for the affordable housing. So that point, particularly Councillor Smythe had asked in the last meeting, that one has been addressed there. Also, the creation of Section 5 on consultation within this report goes into great detail about how we will be working with the public and stakeholders to further develop our ideas on the design. We also have in the other appendices, we've got the council plan talking about our priorities to make sure that those are included from the outset, and then finally a process flow of the consultation. The consultation plan that we have at the back really shows through the sort of coloured circles engagement with residents and stakeholders, officers and council decisions, and at what point they're taken. Hopefully that will show the level of integration with our stakeholders that we have to get, and on which work streams within the overall regeneration scheme for the entire city centre. So again, we're focusing on whilst the heads of terms focus on the Tricorn Centre primarily, actually we are looking at the whole city centre, how this impacts the commercial road, and making sure that residents, stakeholders and businesses are taken on that journey.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think it's interesting to see the lack of people here coming to speak about it, which I think speaks volumes for the amount of work that's happened over the last 3 weeks to reassure people. There's a long written deputation from Delancey, who came yesterday to do an extremely good presentation to councillors, and it was an open invitation to all 42, so thank you very much indeed. I think there's been considerable reassurance to people, but it says to me there's a significant lesson to be learnt there by making sure that we include people and bring them with us, which we hadn't done before the meeting earlier in the month, to make sure that we do that in future so that people understand and know where we're going, and so it's not a surprise which people react badly to. Judith, you're not on my list, but is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I'd just like to say how pleased I am to see that the 3 suggestions I made at the last Cabinet have been taken on board, and I'd like to thank Ben and yourself for doing that. Particularly important to see the commitment to trying to exceed the affordable housing targets that are required in the city, but also to see the new emphasis on linking what's happening in this part of the city with outside, just making it sure it's part of the flow that's got to go on, and also the emphasis on better public engagement. I mean, I do think we've demonstrated through work done on the sea defences and other things that if we work together we can achieve very good public engagement. And indeed, yesterday I was at the event, as a number of people here were, about the future of the Knight and Lee site in Palmerston Road, which is concerning my residents a great deal. And just to start with an open discussion was a good example of how these things need to be done. And so I'm really pleased to see the additional information on that in here. Of course, public engagement is only as good as how it's done. And I really like your diagrams here, but we just have to make sure that it's done in a truly inclusive way, and that it does give some of the people who are a little bit disillusioned with government overall a chance to really get engaged. And it is an opportunity for us all to make sure that local government is, dare I say it, popular and well understood. And that should be something that we bear in mind all the time. I think there are a lot of people out there who think that we're not capable of doing, we as a public servants, as it were, are not capable of doing good developments or anything very, very good. And so I would like to make sure that there are genuine opportunities to take the time to involve people who are feeling fed up and feeling disengaged and feeling disillusioned with government in general. Because these discussions with the public and genuine engagement about these big developments are a really important part of helping our citizens to feel that they have participated in the future of the city and are ambitious and proud about living in Portsmouth.
Okay.
So thank you for having listened at the last time round, and I think give this full support.
Thank you very much indeed. Ben?
Thank you, Leader. I just want to say I think this is a very positive and exciting step for the city centre, and hopefully if we approve this today, which I think we will see some exciting and new things and new life coming to the city centre very soon, and the public will obviously be a big part of how that comes forward.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And I did think the presentation that Delancey did yesterday was very good. I'm just wondering whether there is a way in which we can do that in a more public forum so that residents, businesses, members from the press, etc., can see what the proposals are. Because I think there is a real thirst for a development in the city centre quickly. And I thought Delancey showed off a good range of options when they came to talk to us yesterday, and a wider audience would be good. So my two thoughts were, A, is that, but B, when we're doing these things, can we please make sure that we take people with us so it doesn't come as a surprise when a report appears at Cabinet in future. Any colleagues, are you happy with this? Thank you very much indeed. Last but by no means least, MMD and the port.
Leader, I should highlight that I'm currently a company director of MMD, but because I'm appointed by the council, I have no need or cause to leave the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so it's you and Donna?
Correct, and Chris Ward.
Okay.
And myself.
You. An interesting team.
And Mike thinking about it.
Oh, nice. Okay. Now, as we have new people come talk to us and we're live streaming, Mike and Mark, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Good morning, I'm Mark. I'm the finance manager at the port.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Sellers. I'm the port director, and I'm also a director of MMD.
Okay, so Mike, my first question to you, because Jerry will ask, wants to come and speak, is why are these two appendices confidential? Why can't they be in the public domain?
Okay, so the port industry and particularly operations within the ports are highly competitive. If we are having discussions with customers who are at other ports, if one, it would affect their commercial and their arrangements they've got at other ports, but also it would be, I think, remiss of us to highlight our intentions to our competitors who will do their utmost to avoid our business plan from going ahead.
So if this was in the public domain, your fear is that business that might come here might go to Southampton?
I didn't mention Southampton.
There are other ports, of course.
No, in all seriousness, there are ports that will do what they can to avoid business from moving. It is highly competitive. We have got targets, and some of those are listed within those appendices, and we are having discussions with them, some of which we're at heads of terms. I just don't think it would be responsible for us to actually discuss those.
Okay, but I think there has to be some sort of reporting mechanism into about from MMD to a public body on a regular basis. And I don't know when we last had a report to full council, or maybe we need to be looking at a report from all companies owned by the council on an annual basis, or something of that ilk. Maybe not talking about future business that they're wanting, but at least reflecting on what they have done over the last year. Benjamin.
Leader, I completely agree. Currently, MMD's activities are reported in theory annually to Pred decision meetings, but I think that's probably not the right forum.
That's only 3 of you.
Exactly. And Chris Ward and I have already had a discussion very recently about this, and I think a recommendation should come forward to a future cabinet to look at how the reporting lines of PCC-owned companies are done.
Okay, fine. Christopher, would you can you put your thinking cap on about how to do that? Not now, but
Of course, Leader, but it is set out in the recommendations within the report that there will be a regular reporting back on an annual basis.
Yeah, but I'm hoping it'll be to full council. Anyway, so shall we start, Jerry? You're more than welcome, Jerry.
So this is on item 10, MMD update review. Let's just go firstly to the exemption. If materials are to be exempt, then in the agenda it should say why. Otherwise, every time we have a meeting, you'll have somebody like me come along and object. So let's at least document the reasons for the materials being exempt. And they were great reasons for the exemption. Really good. Let's put them into the agenda so that we know. Okay, so.
Okay, good point. Joe, have you taken note? That's something for you to do.
They are, as far as we're aware, they are the paragraphs 3 and 5 as stated on the agenda.
Yeah, okay, but I think
which
we
is
might.
the financial and business affairs of the authority.
I think we might need to go a little bit further. Yep, no, but I'm sure that Michael and Chris between them can pen something.
We can expand those reasons, so that'd be helpful.
Sorry, Jerry, I cut you off in your prime.
It's fine, I'm used to it. So much of the change in MMD in recent months is to be strongly applauded. The appointment of a senior person into the sales role who's come directly from Southampton and knows many of the, sorry about that word, and knows many of the customers from the nearest enormous competitor port was a touch of genius. Absolutely great. But MMD has received significant support from PCC over the last few years, and every month, if you happen to be the sort of boring person like me that reads the payments that PCC makes every month, you'll see that every month we give them £500,000 or £1 million. And I believe that's not a loan but a gift. Now, Councillor Dowling spoke recently about this funding for MMD, this loan facility that's coming out, being entirely a loan, that they would have to pay it back, and so on, that it should cover all of their capital requirements. What we didn't mention was about the revenue requirements, and we've seen the level of investment that's been made and support for MMD over the last couple of years, and it's very, very significant, and we're not talking about that here today, and maybe we should be. So, I want to know if the borrowing option is in place of the money that PCC gives MMD pretty much every month, or if it's in addition, and I suspect it's in addition. Now, I understand that PCC benefits even if MMD makes a loss because of the value of the rent and rates, port fees and other revenues that accrue as a result of MMD remaining operational, and that without the fees garnered by MMD, the cost per ship into the ferry port would make it so expensive that the ferries would have to go elsewhere to remain competitive, and that would be very bad for Portsmouth as a whole. Now, I understand that MMD is in a much better place than it was a couple of years ago, and we put lots of resources into it, but the reporting is at very best limited. I mean, it's almost negligible. There is none. And really, the financial state of this fully owned subsidiary is being hidden behind the fact that it's a private company. And so the required reporting is that which is required of a company, and that we put the banner up in the annual reporting that says, well, it's below this level of turnover, so we're not going to publish the detailed reports. I think there should be much better reporting. I don't think it should be annual. I think it should be quarterly, and I think it should be in a public meeting, because this is our taxpayers' money that's being spent on this venture. So I understand why this financial appraisal is exempt, because it sets out the investments required from the taxpayers and the business case for those investments. Maybe we should know what the financial appraisal says, even if just in summary. It could be summarised, and the relative benefits shown in graphic form, even if not in numerical form. And that would help people understand why we were doing it. I just reiterate one previous point. Will PCC continue to give money to MMD over and above the loan facility it's extending? And my last request on this matter would be that PCC make it clear and simple why we are ploughing money into MMD. We've had an explanation of why the business case works, because if PCC puts money in here, even though MMD makes a technical loss, in effect, overall, the council makes money and the ferry port stays alive. Maybe we should actually say that rather than dancing around the facts.
Yeah.
That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and very useful points. Thank you very much. So you have a particular question, which Chris, I'm sure, will now answer, about the continuing revenue subsidy on top of the amount of capital.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jerry. You're absolutely right to make the distinction between revenue and capital. Anything that is capital expenditure for MMD is funded by a loan, and the loans have always been repaid. So those loans are repayable. Anything that is revenue expenditure or revenue support has, in effect, been financial support by the parent, i.e. the City Council. And I think we've openly said it before, that MMD has been loss-making. I think it was loss-making 4 times out of the last 5 years. Having said that, only in 3 of the last 5 years, as Mr. Brown pointed out, the bottom line to the council is not the financial loss to MMD. It's a much broader view of the financial affairs of the 2 interrelated parties, being the port and MMD. But in 2 of the last financial years, it returned a net benefit to the council.
Okay, folks. Joe, you said there's a recommendation for a report which I couldn't see. In which case, in the recommendations, Chris.
If I can help, it's recommendation 5 of the report.
Yeah, okay, I've read it several times and I can't see where you're reporting to and when. I'm on page 110.
Correct, page 110. It makes reference to an annual review.
Yeah.
So I think that, whilst it doesn't say when, it quotes the period, it quotes the frequency of it, but it doesn't say where to.
Okay, so I think my suggestion would be it should be saying it's an annual report to full council, including a financial report. Okay, Judith.
I'd like to thank Jerry for that. I mean, I think that we, and I say we just in a corporate collective sense, don't account fully enough for some of these investments. And the annual report to the full council is a good thing to be doing, but I think, oh, excuse me, I think we should be more transparent about the investments we're making and the strategy that we've got to invest. And in particular, I think it's been particularly difficult for an ordinary citizen to find out about the finances of the port and indeed of MMD, because I've tried in the past. I think the amounts of money we're transferring to MMD, given it has got a checkered history in balancing its budgets, and to the port, are quite high. They're certainly higher than, for example, the discussions we've been having about vessel, and the risks we're taking are quite large, I think. And I would like to urge us to ensure that we have regular reporting on all the risks to the board of all these companies that we own and we're considering in future. I think we are caught with MMD. This investment should work. I've got confidence in the team sitting on the Port Advisory Board. But there's something about when we have our annual reports on these investments, I think we need to be able to compare one investment against the other. Personally, this seems to me a much more risky venture than some that we have been considering. And I would support the investment. We want to be ambitious for the port. It's an important part of our economy. It's an important, the losses would be terrific if we close it. The potential seems to be enormous, and the new team explained that well at the Port Advisory Board the other day. So it's potentially pretty exciting. But let's not kid ourselves that this is less risky than some of the other investments we've been struggling over.
Okay, thank you. I think there will be different views about levels of risk. I think we heard at the beginning of this meeting from Donna and Luke their view about the level of risk that was acceptable for tenants in the high-rise buildings, and we have a different view from them about the level of risks that we think is acceptable for tenants. And there will be differences of view about the different risks to do with different companies. Jeanette.
Thanks, Gerald. Just a question really to Chris. Following up from Jerry's point, when do you foresee the continued parent company support ending?
We anticipate that in 2020-2021 that MMD will probably be making a £1 million loss, but that actually translates into a £1 million net benefit to the council. And then beyond that financial year, MMD in its own right, we anticipate will be in surplus.
From 2021?
MMD in its own right will be in surplus from 21-22.
Okay. All right, colleagues. Are people happy with... Oh, Mike, sorry. Do you want to leap in? Yes, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. Would you like me to introduce the report?
No, I was going to get Mike to, on the basis he runs the port and therefore knows what he's talking about.
Actually, it is about that. That's why I wanted to just really talk through.
I know you look hurt now, especially as you wrote it. We should have Mike first, and then we will hang upon your every word, Christopher.
Okay, and I completely get what Mr. Brown was saying with regards to public money. This decision with regards to MMD has taken considerable time, at least 12 months in terms of the review. There's been independent assessments from forensic accountants. I never knew forensic accountants existed until we started to pull this business.
We spend a fortune on them
together, through to industry consultants to look at the business plan that we've put forward. So it's not been a decision or it's not been a recommendation that's been put forward without the scrutiny that it's deserved because of the amount of money. Ports are not cheap to run, unfortunately, and MMD historically has been one commodity terminal for fruit, and you've heard the statistics with regards to the bananas, and it is still important for fresh produce because of the location of MMD, of the port, and where the ripening centres are. What we haven't done and what we are doing now is we're utilising that facility for other commodities, so not just fruit. So fruit will be our core business, but we're looking to secure long-term agreements, better agreements than the legacy agreements where we've been subject to weather conditions, the yield when it comes to the fruit that's been coming through. All of that is going to be around project cargoes and the sustainability of the fruit as well, because the commodity is shifting to containers, to containerise, so we need to adapt for that as well. So there's been quite a significant amount of work, and actually, with no disrespect to Chris, Mark has done an awful lot of work in terms of pulling this report together as well, as our finance manager. And we have brought a new team in. We have got people who have come from the private sector, who know the port industry, who are now starting to generate the inquiries that will be the sustainability and long-term sustainability for MMD.
Okay. Christopher.
There's Mark.
Now I'm going to get to Christopher first.
I'm quite happy to leave it there, unless you would like me to introduce the report, Chair.
No, Chris, come. Your words of wisdom.
Okay, just by way of introduction, I echo what Mike has said. Mark Webb has put an enormous amount of work into this, and I've come along at the end and done some topping and tailing, etc. But he has done a tremendous amount of work on this. The report before you really sets out what are the options for the MMD site. So there are five options presented within the report. One option says retain MMD on that site. 4 alternative options say do something different, all of which don't involve retaining MMD. The report before you recommends option 2. Option 2 is to retain MMD, but recognising that in retaining MMD, there will be a requirement for about £15 million worth of capital investment over the next 10 years. And I think it's important to understand why that recommendation has been made. So, of all of the alternatives that have been put forward, we have looked both at what we anticipate the financial return to be over the next 20 years and the risk of that financial return being realised. Now, as Mike said, just to give Cabinet a degree of independent validation, the MMD business case has been reviewed independently by an external consultancy company who say that they are satisfied with it, and the financial modelling has been reviewed by, as Mike has said, a group of forensic accountants who have said they are happy with it. So the process has been, what do the financials and the risks associated with each of those 5 options look like? The preferred option, which is option 2, which says retain MMD, is a £70 million return in today's value over 20 years. And for the benefit of the audience, the next best option was a £15 million return over 20 years, at broadly the same level of risk. We've run some sensitivity analysis, so we've looked at some scenarios to test what the likely range of outcomes might be. If we looked at a pessimistic scenario for MMD, that would return something in the order of £30 million over the next 20 years in today's money, which still is better than the next best alternative. So there's clear water in terms of the financial and risk analysis that's been done of all of the options between retaining MMD and what the alternative might be. However, the report also makes a number of recommendations to protect the council's investment. So it suggests, as we've described, that there should be periodic reviews of MMD, so look at the long-term viability of MMD. Does the 20-year business plan still stack up? Is there longevity of the business? Because you wouldn't expect to be continuing to invest in a business that doesn't necessarily have longevity. So there's periodic reviews, and in terms of the £15 million investment, it puts a number of criteria around that investment as well. So it's not at this stage, here's a £15 million cheque to MMD to go and spend as they wish. It's here's a loan facility to be drawn down on the basis of individual investment cases for that money that meets certain criteria, which will all be around whether it delivers additional income or whether it's required to sustain the existing level of income in the business, but it also does other evaluation around whether that is also the best investment for that business, for that outcome. I think, apart from that, Chair, I'd obviously leave it open to yourselves to ask any questions that you'd like.
Okay. Mark, would you like to add anything?
I think what's been said is fair, it's objective, I've got nothing else to add.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, Darren.
You say in the report the public can see that it's a £50 million investment over 20 years, and you've talked about a £70 million investment, £70 million return over 20 years. Are you envisaging that level investment to be steady or biased towards the front or the back end? I'm trying not to talk about the exempt appendices, which go into that in more detail, Chris.
No, I mean, a number of these things we have put in the open report. The 15 million is relatively steady over the first 10 years. I think that the point that I probably didn't draw out was the fact that the £70 million return is after taking account of all of the capital investment that's required. So it's a return after the capital investment. So you don't kind of net one off from the other. But then the remainder of the investment is kind of steady state investment of what, as you would expect in any capital intensive type operation.
Yeah. Okay, that's one more.
That's fine, because that to me sounds much better than sort of, investing a lot of money in a company, which is very easy to do with commercial companies, investing a lot of money up front and hoping you're going to get a big return at the back end. I think this more steady state approach encompasses a really acceptable approach to risk, which is why I endorse this report, despite the fact it's about the difficulties, as always, of councils investing in commercial companies. This steady state approach really does work, and I really like it.
Okay. Benjamin, your portfolio?
Thank you, Leader. I think I'd echo what Mike has said in terms of the amount of time that has gone into this review. I think there have been questions over this in comparison to other potential investments the council could or should make, but this is something that has undergone a significant review with significant external consultants, and perhaps most importantly, and this is what differentiates this between other potential investments, is that it has been entirely cross-party, in that I've made myself available to all opposition spokespeople, and obviously Councillor Jones sits on the board of MMD, and this has also had a good airing at Port Advisory Board. So I think that cross-party view is what's key to ensuring this is something that is sustainable into the future.
Okay, yeah, and I think it is one of the things to learn from, in that when we created the Port Advisory Board, we did it specifically to try to make sure that there was a cross-party level of knowledge of what was going on, partly because cabinet members change over time and you need to skill people up and give them information, but partly because actually almost everything we seem to do, if we do it cross-party, takes the political temperature down and seems to work better. And unfortunately that wasn't the strategy in terms of vessel, and I think I'm sorry, and that I think has been a significant problem. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I did add my extra recommendation for a report to come to council, an annual report to come to full council with a financial report. Golly, you all right? Michael, Christopher, Mike, are you all right with that?
My only question would be is, what will council do with the report when it receives
Accept it.
Because it can't make, of course, any decisions in relation.
It can accept a report.
Thank you.
And note its thanks to those people who've worked so hard. Judith.
I think in view of the kind of way in which full council is operated, it would be very, very useful if there was an all-council member pre-meeting when people can ask questions that wouldn't be necessarily appropriate to ask in public, or that might help them to understand what for some people is a complicated set of figures.
Let's have a look at that, because if you did that, inevitably that would be done in in a closed private thing, and the point about it being public is that it should be in open and it should be in the public. But anyway, so...
I'm not suggesting that there are different papers
No,
going, but there is a lot sometimes for people to understand.
I'm sure you're right, and I'm sure there's possibility for briefings, but if we're going to do something in public, we should do it in public then, and then we need to move to a decision.
Leader, perhaps officers would be happier if we were to go down a system similar to the budget, in that it comes to Cabinet the week before and then forwarded to full council.
I'm sure that is fine. It can get washed through full council, through Cabinet before going. I'm sure that's fine. Okay, and with that additional recommendation, colleagues, are you happy with the report? Yes. Thank you very much indeed. That, I think, ladies and gentlemen, Joe, is it. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for attending.